Hey there! Welcome to this video, where we dive into one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, Ted Bundy. Grab a coffee, settle in, and let's unravel the dark and twisted story of a man who shocked the world with his charm, intelligence, and horrific crimes. Now, you might already know a little about Ted Bundy. He's one of those names that instantly brings chills. But what made him so terrifying wasn't just the heinous acts he committed. It was the fact that he seemed so normal. Actually, more than normal. Ted Bundy was charismatic, good-looking, and highly educated. He was the last person you'd suspect of being a serial killer. That's what makes his story so haunting. So, who was Ted Bundy? And how did he go from being a seemingly regular guy to confessing to the murders of more than 30 women across several states in the 1970s? Let's take a closer look.
He didn't look like anybody's notion of somebody who would tear apart young girls.
Ted Bundy's early life. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. But his start in life was far from ordinary. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was unmarried, and back in the 1940s, that was a big deal. To avoid the stigma of being a single mother, Louise's parents raised Ted as their own son, while Louise pretended to be his sister. Imagine growing up in a family dynamic like that. Ted eventually discovered the truth about his parentage, and many believe that revelation deeply affected him. But as a young man, he appeared to have it all together. He was intelligent, did well in school, and later attended the University of Washington. He even studied psychology and later law. On the surface, Ted Bundy seemed like the kind of guy who could do anything he set his mind to. But beneath that polished exterior, there was something sinister lurking.
Notorious serial killer Ted Bundy is having his story retold in documentaries and crime series this year.
The first signs of trouble. The 1970s were a time of upheaval in America, and it was during this decade that Bundy's dark side began to emerge. His crimes followed a disturbing pattern. Bundy often targeted young women who were attractive and had long, dark hair parted in the middle. He had a type, and it was eerily similar to an ex-girlfriend who had broken his heart years earlier. Bundy used his charm to lure women into his trap. He'd pretend to be injured, sometimes wearing a sling or a cast, and ask for help. Once his victims were close enough, he'd overpower them and take them to a secluded area. What's chilling is how calculated he was. Bundy was methodical, careful, and had an uncanny ability to blend in.
So who was he, and why are true crime fans still fascinated with him decades later?
The crimes and the investigation. Bundy's killing spree spanned multiple states, including Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. Each time, he'd leave a trail of horror and heartbreak. Authorities initially struggled to connect the dots because Bundy was so good at covering his tracks. Remember, this was before the days of advanced forensic technology or even reliable databases. But the evidence started piling up. Eyewitnesses reported seeing a man named Ted in a Volkswagen Beetle near some of the crime scenes. That was the first crack in his carefully constructed facade. In 1975, Bundy was finally arrested in Utah for driving a stolen car. But even then, no one knew the full extent of his crimes. During this time, he was also connected to the disappearance of several women. Police were starting to suspect him, but Bundy wasn't going down without a fight.
A charming stranger in a bar. It's Ted Bundy. They start having an incredible relationship in her mind.
The escapes. One of the most unbelievable parts of Bundy's story is his ability to escape custody. Not once, but twice. The first time, in 1977, Bundy jumped from a second-story courthouse window in Colorado while preparing for his trial. He was on the run for 6 days before being caught. The second escape was even more daring. Later that year, Bundy managed to saw through a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell and climb out. He fled to Florida, where he committed some of his most gruesome crimes, including the brutal attack at Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house. The trial and the media frenzy. By the late 1970s, Bundy's name was making headlines across the country. His trial was one of the first to be televised, turning it into a media circus. People were fascinated by him. How could someone who looked so normal do such horrible things? Women even wrote him love letters and showed up at his trial, mesmerized by his charm. Bundy, ever the narcissist, acted as his own attorney during the trial. He loved being in the spotlight and used it as an opportunity to showcase his intelligence. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Bite marks on one of the victims matched Bundy's teeth, sealing his fate. In 1980, Bundy was sentenced to death for his crimes. The confession. Even after his conviction, Bundy continued to deny his guilt for years. It wasn't until shortly before his execution in 1989 that he confessed to killing more than 30 women. Many believed the actual number could be much higher. His confessions provided chilling details about his methods and motives, offering a rare glimpse into the mind of a serial killer.
Biographers say he was bright and charismatic. His good looks and charm helped him gain acceptance into political circles.
Why Ted Bundy stands out. So, why does Bundy's story continue to captivate people decades later? Part of it is the sheer horror of his crimes. But there's also the unsettling realization that someone like Ted Bundy could exist. He wasn't the stereotypical monster hiding in the shadows. He was the guy next door, the law student, the volunteer at a crisis hotline. Bundy's story reminds us that evil doesn't always look like we expect it to. And that's what makes it so terrifying. The legacy of fear. Ted Bundy's case changed the way law enforcement handles serial killers. It highlighted the importance of sharing information between states and helped develop modern profiling techniques. But for the families of his victims, the pain and loss remain unimaginable. It's also a stark reminder to trust our instincts. Bundy's victims were kind-hearted people who were just trying to help someone in need. Tragically, that kindness was exploited.
So leave him with the obviously irrational belief that...
Final thoughts. Ted Bundy's story is a dark chapter in history, but it's also one we can learn from. It teaches us about the dangers of blind trust, the importance of staying vigilant, and the complexity of human behavior. Bundy may be gone, but the impact of his crimes lingers on. Thanks for sticking with me through this chilling journey. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And hey, let me know in the comments what you think about Ted Bundy. Why do you think he's still such a fascination all these years later? Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other.